day. Welcome to Adventures in Life. My name is Val Benencosa, and I'm your host today. We have a special guest today that you probably don't know. This is Earl Beecher, Dr. Earl Beecher. Earl, you always got a bag of tricks. What is it you brought today for us?
Oh, thank you, Val. It's kind of fun to sit here in the guest seat for a change.
Well, let me tell you, I think I would rather be off stage than here at your place.
Not necessarily. What I wanted to talk about today is there's a new research bureau which you are working with me in.
The Contact Point.
The Contact Point. That's the name we've decided on. And what does POINT stand for?
You know, I always lose that.
Place of Information, Networking, and Trade.
All I know is it sounds like a heck of a business.
It is. It's going to be a great business. What we're going to do is establish the Contact Point in the World Trade Center in Long Beach so that people can call us and get questions. Now, we are setting up a macroeconomic database there so that anybody who has any questions of business type or contacts that they want to make here in the United States, domestically or overseas, we are trying to get all the networking in place so that we can do this and be in touch with everybody.
So basically this is people who want to start up a business, people who are in business, and they can just expand out or go to you if they need help in any kind of way in business?
If they need help and if they need consulting and people to help them, there are 6 of the universities we've been talking to who have indicated that they are willing to have student interns working with us, and that will give us some access also to faculty so that we could be pulling in experts from 6 major universities if somebody needs consultants, especially involving trade overseas and things of that nature.
Now, will it be using students also?
It will be using students as interns.
Is there various prices? I mean, can you use a student for, say, a new company starting up?
Even a new company starting up, the students can come in and help you and guide you to know how to fill out all the forms that you have to fill in order to engage in business in the city, the county, whatever, to get the licenses, and also to help you fill out the forms for the banks to get loans and the SBA and, you know, all of that.
The hard part.
Sort of take you by the hand and lead you along if you have that desire to do business.
Well, how do they go about getting you?
Well, we are not completely set up at the Contact Point, but we are starting to lay the groundwork. And one of the reasons I wanted to be with you today, Val, and to talk to our viewers, is that a lot of the groundwork is going to be done through the Chambers of Commerce and the city economic development agencies. And one of the things that I wanted to describe for you today is that there's a service that the State Board of Equalization does.
Oh, wait a minute.
That we want to come back to the Chambers of Commerce and through them to reach the businesses in their cities.
Now, basically, when you say the State Board of Equalization, that usually strikes fear into the heart of any businessman who starts up thinking audits, money, I got to watch out for the state. What exactly is the function of the State Board of Equalization?
Well, the function that the State Board of Equalization that I want to talk about today is a publication that they put out. It's called Taxable Sales in California. And they put it out quarterly. So I brought the first, second, third, and fourth quarters for 1994. The 1995 issues are not out yet. And then the annual for 94. And every city in the state, in these publications, they have at the beginning all of the state's retail sales, and then they go into the counties, and then they have a segment for each city in the state. And what I have done that I wanted to explain to you today, Val, is that in the city of El Monte, we happen to be here in the studio at El Monte.
Yes.
I wanted to show how this report could be useful to any businessman who is conducting retail sales in El Monte.
Yeah, perhaps you can show us exactly what you came up with.
Okay, what I came up with is a list of tables, and I know you can't see them on camera, but I'm going to just sort of show what they are. There are various categories, and as you can see on the computer run that we do for each city, We have the apparel stores, and there are 5 tables prepared for the apparel stores within the city. Then the general merchandise stores, which would include the department stores and the dry goods and all of that type of thing. Then followed by the drug stores, 5 tables, and I'm going to explain what each one of those tables do. Then the food stores. This does not include the sales of food which are not subject to retail sales tax.
Okay, you mean like vending machines and stuff like that?
If there's a sales tax involved, it would be reported. But when you go to the grocery store, certain raw vegetables and so forth that are not prepared are not subject to sales tax.
I see.
And so they are not included in the taxable sales figures here.
So we're talking about the donuts at the police
More or
office.
less,
Yes,
something
okay.
like that. And when we get through there, they have the packaged liquor stores and then the eating and drinking places. And sometimes eating and drinking places show more sales than the food stores do, but that's because the food stores, a lot of their sales are exempt from the sales tax. But at least it gives us a picture, and we can get a very clear profile of a city from this information. Now here we have eating and drinking places, home furnishings and type stores, the building materials and farm equipment stores, automobile dealers, and each of these pages has 5 tables for the stores of El Monte in this type, the service stations, and other retail stores, anything that was not included. And this other retail stores takes into account your specialty stores like photography stores, florists, greeting cards, something that's a unique type. And we can tell you how many of those kinds of stores are in each city. Then we have the total of all the retail stores. Then you have other outlets, which would include any taxable sales for medical, dental, legal services, entertainment, things other than stores. And then finally the grand total. And the grand total is the one that's everything that's been reported to the State Board of Equalization that it was doing business in El Monte.
Well,
now, I have the data going back to 1949, but these tables I only took back to 1980, so that we can look at what's been going on the last 15 years.
Well, Earl, I look at these tables and all I see is a whole mess of numbers. I mean, what exactly can an individual derive from this?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. I used to teach the forecasting seminar at the university, and I took great delight in telling the students, I want you to get me the information for a city, and then tell me exactly what's going on in that city. Is it growing? Is it stable? Is it going through business cycles? What's happening, and how can you forecast what the sales for an individual store or an individual business in that city will be, so that every single business owner in the city could use this kind of information and develop his sales targets and break it down by quarter, and then from there to months, almost to week, and almost by day of the week if he wanted to, and tell. Let me explain I was teaching a seminar for the SBA, and we had a group of businessmen from Long Beach coming there to the university for this seminar. And beforehand, I picked out a florist randomly.
Okay.
And then I went to the group of the florist information.
Which were the other retails?
Which was the other retails. And I knew that in the city, there had been 89 stores with sales permits, so that anybody doing business has to be licensed and have a permit and report in. So I knew there were 89 stores in the city that went that way. And I looked at the information, and I knew that that was last year. This year there were only 88, so there was 1 fewer stores in business. And so I happened to just ask this gentleman, I said to him, how's your store doing this year? And he said, well, my sales are up 4% over last year. And I was very impressed because he had the information covering the first half of the year, and he'd watched it that closely. Not too many people watch their sales and know what's going on to that degree. At least I was impressed that he did. And I said, they're up 4%. He said, right. I said, would it be of interest to you to know that in your category, in the city of Long Beach, that the sales are up 8% for the category as a whole.
Earl, I'm going to have to stop you just for a minute. We need to take a break for a bit of public service announcement. Welcome back to Adventures in Life. We're with Dr. Earl Beecher, and we cut him off right in the middle of a story, so we'd like to come back to that florist that he's talking to. Earl, can you tell us a little bit more about him?
Okay, the florist, I picked him out of the class sort of randomly, and I said, your sales are up 4% over last year. He said, yes, they're running 4% ahead. I said, would you be interested in knowing that there is one fewer store within your category, so you should have a bigger share of the pie, and that the sales for your category of stores are running 8% ahead of last year? Are you still content with 4?
Probably hurt his ego.
No, he looked at me, he says, how did you find that information? I said, that's what I was in hopes you'd say, because I have the State Board of Equalization information that tells it. Now, let me, for example, show you what this can show us about El Monte. What were El Monte's total sales in 1994? $796,958,000, and that was among 2,186 retail outlets. So down here we have the average sales per outlet.
Oh, I see.
So that we can see, and then we do this by individual categories of stores as well. So if you have an apparel store, I could tell you what the average apparel store is doing. You could compare your apparel store to the average. If you're bigger than average, you could then forecast with the data of all of them and come up with what you would be expecting to sell, and do it by quarter of the year, so that you've got within a 3-month breakdown.
All right, so basically you're telling me that there were 2,186 permits in the city given that year, over about $800 million in sales.
Yes.
And down here
we have the average sales per store in thousands.
So basically, if I look along that line, you're saying it's about $388,000 per store?
Now, here's what's interesting. Did El Monte sell more or less in 94 than they did in 93? In other words, I want to go back and get a little history. When do you think El Monte's sales hit their highest peak?
Oh, golly.
California's been in a slump, hasn't it?
Right, it
How
has.
bad has that slump been?
Oh, the last several years it's been really bad.
Okay.
Probably have to go back to late 80s.
All right. In 1989, El Monte sold $806 million. In 90, they sold $820 million. In 91, 815. In 92, 842 million. So it did all right there. Then it dropped back in 93 to 763 million, a very major drop in what was reported. In 94, it was 796. So here we can give people the actual figures and show how bad the impact of the California recession or cutback has been. Some cities have suffered more than others.
Well, evidently it didn't take too bad of a toll on this one until just the last 2 years.
The last couple of years it's been down. And it built from 1980 from 466 million. It showed a steady climb to where it had doubled almost.
Yes.
And then it's leveled and dropped.
Can you show us a little bit about the quarterly changes and how that helps us?
Okay, we took the sales of each quarter of the year, the first quarter, and divided it by the annual and got a percent.
Okay.
Then the second quarter and got a percent, so that the percent of the year. Now typically in El Monte, the first quarter of the year they sell anywhere from about 21 to 24% of the year's sales. Mm-hmm. The second quarter runs bigger. The highest year we can find here is it reached as high as 31% in 1984, but it usually runs around 25 to 26. The third quarter of the year runs around 25 to 26, and the fourth quarter is a little bit bigger, so that as time is passing, it's building during the year. The first quarter is typically the lowest.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of that might have something to do with the way that it's reported to the State Board of Equalization.
How was that?
For example, some businesses only report on an annual basis.
Oh, I see.
And if they turn it in the fourth quarter, it would make that quarter look bigger. Also, you have the Christmas holidays, the holiday season there, so typically the fourth quarter is bigger anyway.
That's what I would expect to see, but yet as I look at this, it's almost broken up evenly.
It's fairly balanced in El Monte, more so than in certain other cities. And if you take a look by the type of store, when we go to the apparel store, the first quarter can be as low as 18% of the year, and the fourth quarter as big as 33%. It's almost double. So that a store owner can begin to get an idea of what their sales would be in any given quarter of the year. They can break it up by months. If they know roughly what the sales have been running, what would we suggest El Monte's sales in 95 and 96 would be? We could continue the trend and take it, and it's going to be around the 800 million level. We can tell pretty well by kind of store what their sales would be for the quarter. If we took the first quarter of the year and broke it into January, February, and March, we would do it by the number of trading days within each of the months. And we find that March has 3 more days than February, so it's 10% bigger than February, typically. Okay. March has 31 days, February has 28. So if those days happen to be business days, mostly, so that a business owner can now begin to zero in and determine what his sales targets are for his business. If he knows what % of his sales he can afford to pay for rent or for help,
or even
employees, are building the inventory and having, you can see where this information would be helpful to the individual. We have the average sales per store by kind of store, so that if he's got a service station, he knows exactly what his sales forecast would be for the service station or whatever. Then coming down, the first table then is the actual retail sales in dollar amounts. Then we broke it to percentages of the year. And then taking the average sales per store by quarter and in the annual total. Then we got down to where we took the change from year to year. And this is where it's been interesting. For example, 1994 showed a 4% increase over 93. 93 showed a 9% drop below 92.
Okay, so this is the annual
so it's a rolling total. We have the annual here. We also have the change by quarters, so that you can check each quarter and tell what's going on in the city by quarter. In our own center, our research center that we're doing, Val, we can compare the individual city, like compare Whittier to El Monte, or Anaheim to Santa Ana, and see where the growth is, what kind of stores seem to be emerging and doing more business, what kinds are going down, how many stores there are of an individual kind within the city. And then down here at the end, we took the quarter to quarter horizontally. So you'd have the first quarter and the sales are up, the second up slightly, the third up slightly, the fourth, and then drop the first. And so we're just running across horizontally. But I think there's a lot of information available to help people in running their business and planning their business. And the State Board of Equalization, California does an outstanding job. I've contacted other states. They don't have this kind of information available.
Well, can we take an example? Let's say I want to be a service station man.
All right.
Now, if I came to you and I would say, hey, I don't know where I want to put this service station, could you give me something that could show me where it looks like
we could
growths
probably
are?
find where the service stations are. We could tell you how many service stations there are in El Monte. And that's been interesting because in 1980 there were 50. In 1994 there were 22. And we've all watched service stations close up, haven't we?
We have.
And what have the sales per station done in the meantime? They've gone from $695,000 up to over $1 million per station in a year. And we can tell you what quarterly is, so we know what kind of seasonal travel there is and how much people are buying. Which quarter do you suppose is the busiest quarter for service stations in El Monte?
Well, I would think during the travel season.
When would that put it?
Probably second and third quarter.
Well, you can look here and you can see you're right. In some years, but this last year they were a little bit higher. Well, the second quarter was the highest quarter in 91. Let's see where we are in 94. They are up to the third quarter was the high one in 94, which would be September, October, November.
That surprises me because they'd be going back to school.
No, it'd be July, August, September.
There you go.
July, August, September is the third quarter. I beg your pardon. I keep thinking of an academic year. Okay, so that we have it by quarter. We have what the sales have been doing. and how many permits there are. We can break it down by the kind of store, and this does not include sales outside of California. For example, if you're in a manufacturing business and many of your sales are out of state, they're not taxable California sales.
Well, that would be right.
And if they're overseas, they're not taxable California sales. So you have to know the limitations of the information that you're using. But if you're retailing in a city in California, we can get you the kind of information and show you exactly what your sales should be, break it down for you by months, almost by week, and you can begin to target and know whether you're going to be able to make it this year or not.
This is all so interesting. We need to take another break, though, for another public service announcement, so we'll do that and come right back.
All right.
Earl, we've been talking about this table, and myself, I can see two unique places. Me being an accountant or a CPA, I can see that this would help me immensely. And as a businessman, I'd like to know some of this stuff. A Chamber of Commerce, my gosh, would want this thing. What do you think?
I think that it's very helpful because it shows the growth of the city. It gives an idea that we can get the real estate information tied in with this and the price per square foot and all of this, and get some trends on that as well, and help people to know whether they want to be in business in a given city or where in the location. You get the population information and tie in the personal income information along with it, you see, and it helps a businessman to know where they're at.
And you have all this data?
This data is very readily available. We can get this for them, and I used to write the forecast for Orange County for the Orange County Business Journal every year, and we were into entertainment, we were into agriculture, all of the other elements. This is just one element, which is the retail sales.
Well, tell me a little bit more about what does the contact point do besides the statistics?
Well, the idea being that people who want to be in business or are in business and need additional help, we will be networking with other people who are there to help them. We know where the agencies and the chambers and what they do, so that we can refer and help people to get together to get the guidance they need, especially when it comes to doing business overseas or across the border, Mexico, Canada, wherever.
So international.
We're establishing all of those contacts. We're not reinventing the wheel, we're finding out what's in place and how to get in touch with it.
So if I wanted to know, I come to you, you put me in touch with the individual who's the guru at it, and they take it from there.
Yes, we're also working with organizations like AiL, American Women's Economic Development Group in Long Beach, which gives seminars almost every night of the week. And of course with the various colleges and universities and vocational training schools. We're in touch with these people to try and see, all right, a businessman knows he needs some help in some regard. What kind of information does he need? He needs to know what's available, and then he needs to know how to use it. And I think that this helps people to set their goals.
Yeah, I can see that.
And the most important thing is we are getting in touch with the chambers of commerce, so that would be a good place that we can get this information into their hands and they can share it with their business owners within the city.
Well, Earl, let me ask you one last time. Can you tell us a little bit about the address, how they can get in touch with you?
Well, at the present time, we are still in the formative stages. I'm accumulating this. The easiest way, my phone number will appear at the end of the show. Okay. And people can call me there, and then we can find out who's interested, and when we are ready to roll, we'll roll with them. We'll be in touch.
That sounds great. We thank you for being with us, Adventures in Life.